All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this is the third event in our Read Your Mind Teen Author Series, brought to you by the Lewiston Public Library, the Portland Public Library, and local Maine Bookseller Print. Read Your Mind is a monthly virtual series focusing on teen mental health and wellness, featuring young adult authors and community health experts. Our goal is to explore complex and common mental health concerns together through the vehicle of teen books. My name is Harper Chance. I use he, him pronouns and they, them pronouns, and I am the teen librarian at the Lewiston Public Library. And my co-host here is Kelly Blue, the teen librarian at the Portland Public Library. We will be running the show behind the scenes and monitoring the Q&A if you need anything. That's all. Today, we are joined by authors Adib Khorram, Shiro, and Julian Winters to discuss how the intersection of masculinity, queerness, racial, and cultural identity impact teen mental health. Adib, Mark, and Julian will be interviewed by our youth interviewers, local Portland teen Antonio and Jason from Maine Boys to Men, and our community guests are both from Maine Boys to Men. Before we hear from our authors, Maine Boys to Men is going to give us a brief description of what their organization does and why they're here today and how you can contact them after the event. But first, I want to give a quick content warning. Today, we are possibly talking about a variety of sensitive topics, including depression, anxiety, panic attacks, structural racism, police violence, gendered violence, and others. This is why we have expert community partners joining us, and feel free to direct your questions to any of us if you have any. We also want to encourage audience members to be gentle with yourselves and leave the webinar at any time if you need to. Kelly has kindly put up on screen for us some of our local and national resources. If you or someone you know are in crisis or need support, we encourage you to reach out to any of these and contact your library if you need help finding others. We know how to find them. For any Portland Public School students, I've been asked to remind you that your school social workers are also available if you need someone to talk to after this event. For those watching via Zoom, we will collect your questions throughout the conversation using the Q&A feature. For those on Facebook, feel free to add your questions as comments at any time. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time to relay your questions to the presenters. This program will be recorded for future use and viewing, so you can come back to it later if you're interested. And to start off, I'm going to turn things over briefly now to our community partners at Maine Boys to Men. Danny, here you are.
Awesome. Thank you, Harper. So I'm going to speak really quickly to the organization Maine Boys to Men that I work for and sort of what we do. Super excited to be here and speaking with these authors that are writing on such important topics today. Maine Boys to Men is an organization that works largely in the greater Portland area with the mission to reduce and end gender-based violence, specifically male violence towards self and others. And we do so through a set of unique workshops, specifically working with middle school boys, high school folks of all genders, and adults, youth-serving adults as well, around the topic areas of consent and empathy and gender-based stereotypes, trying to develop a broader and more expansive sense of masculinity for all those in the community that seek for it. And a big thing for Maine Boys to Men that I want to just mention really, really quickly is that we think boys and men aren't broken by any standard, but rather they're bombarded by narrow and confusing messages, often destructive messages about what masculinity is and is not, which contributes to a culture of self-harm, disrespect, and violence against others. So our unique set of experiential workshops, which is rooted in a broader view of masculinity, really empowers people to notice and intervene in potentially harmful situations before they become violent. So I'd love for folks who are interested in more about our organization to find us. Our website is just mainboystomen.org. And right now we have trainings open, less so with individuals in schools, but with youth-serving adults. So if you identify as an educator or coach or a youth-serving adult and you're interested in learning more about our content, there's trainings available on our website that you can sign up for. Also, trainings for new fathers to speak to the importance of healthy masculinity and fatherhood, and also trainings on how to develop and bring our middle school content to middle schoolers that you serve. So that's what I got. Really excited to be here and really excited to hear from these authors.
Thank you, Danny. So now I'm going to introduce you to our authors, Adib Khorram, Shiro, and Julian Winters. Adib is the author of Darius, The Great Is Not Okay, which earned the William C. Morris Debut Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Young Adult Literature, and a Boston Globe Horn Book Award. as well as multiple other honors and accolades. His follow-up, Darius the Great Deserves Better, received 3-star reviews and was an instant indie bestseller. Marco Shiro is the award-winning author of Anger is a Gift, which won the 2019 Schneider Family Book Award, and Each of Us a Desert, both of us with 14. Their middle grade debut, The Insiders, is due out in 2021. And Julian Winters is an award-winning author of young adult novels Running with Lions, How to Be Remy Cameron, and The Summer of Everything. Running with Lions is the recipient of an IBPA Benjamin Franklin Gold Award, and his next novel, Right Where I Left You, will be released in spring 2022. Our youth interviewers today are Antonio, who is a senior in high school, a Portland Public Library Teen Advisory Board member, the president of his Black Student Union, and is also involved in many other youth-serving organizations in Portland and in the state, throughout the state of Maine. And Jason, who works with Maine Boys to Men. So now I'm going to turn it over to Adib, Mark, Julian, Antonio, and Jason to talk about masculinity and your books. Come on back and join me whenever you're ready. Hello, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Wait for our friends to come back. I can just talk to you if you want. Antonio, hello.
Hey guys. I had a question. Was more about like the character themselves. I see that a lot of them have like really good intentionality. Like I know a lot of people that can relate to this, and I was wondering who are the character based on, and how was like the process of like making them into a being.
Who wants to go first?
I can simplify it. I can go. A lot of the characters are like. I remember when I saw the cover for Julian's book, I was like surprised. I saw the labels and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." That's the first one that caught my eyes. And I saw that all the characters having personality, like their personalities and things, create them, and not just facets of them. And I was wondering, are they based out of real people? Is this your experience you're writing about, or who are you projecting in this?
It's funny because I tell myself all the time Remy is not based on me. But the reality of it is yes, quite a bit of Remy at his core, at his center, is very much me and my thought process and just the things that I have either experienced or experienced within my community or within my environment. So yes, but as far as the other characters, no, those are all totally from my head. Do not let my friends find out and think that it's about them, okay? Because it's not.
Excuse you.
There is a character, there's a character in there, Mr. Khorram. I don't know who he's based off. He just kind of came to me while I was writing.
This is erasure.
But this is definitely not about one of my friends.
Wouldn't it technically be cultural appropriation?
That's right. How dare you? How dare you appropriate my culture of drinking?
That's you.
We're a very oppressed class of tea drinkers.
Oh gosh, yes.
You know what? But I know sometimes, like as authors, we're like, "Oh, it's not based on real people." I fully put my middle school bully in my middle school book, and when we got to the copy edit stage, they were like, "Do you really want to commit to putting his full name in the book?" I was like, "Yes, absolutely, 100%. I don't care." So. Who won?
I love your energy.
Why did you tell anyone that was his actual name?
Yeah, I don't even care. I'm like, you're and guess who won? Me, because I'm publishing a book technically about you.
Right. So if I do name anyone after one, I just pretend like it's a made up name, and that way if someone asks me, like, no, it's pure coincidence. I'm a big believer in plausible deniability.
I gave that away. That's not happening at all.
I absolutely agree that it's really hard to make any character from nothing, and so for me, Darius is not me, but he has a lot of similarities to me, and I feel like one of my jobs as an author is to make sure that I'm not writing a biography or fan fiction of myself, and so I have to make him different from me in ways, and lots of the other characters are like I'm plucking little bits of other people and using them to like spark life into a character. For instance, I do have a friend who has been known to spit Coke out of her nose. Coca-Cola.
Wow, I was like, this got dark.
Right,
What's happening? This is
It
derailed.
could be carbonated beverage out of
Yeah.
your nose.
Thank you for the clarification.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We were 13 at the time. None of us were doing anything harder than pixie sticks, which also you should never mix with soda
Right.
or pop, depending on. I don't know what people say in Maine. Is Maine a pop state or a soda state? Or a Coke state?
I think we're a soda state.
Okay.
At least that's my experience.
Okay. So don't mix pixie sticks with soda and then seal the bottle back up. That's how you make a mess in your mom's car and get grounded for a week.
Oh, that sounds very specific.
Sorry, this went on a wild tangent. All of which to say, I am always borrowing from people around me in different ways, and in ways that, if I like them, hopefully won't offend them, and if I don't like them, probably would offend them if they knew to look for it. But they never will because they're losers.
Well, we're off to a good start.
We should have warned you the chaotic energy we would bring when you bring the three of us
we
together.
all haven't seen each other in a really long time.
I know, that's it right there.
That's a part of it. So I also, like Adib, I also borrow things. Like there's things I've gone through, or people I know. Like all of Moss's major friend group in Anger is a Gift is based off of all the kids I made friends with my freshman year of college, because I felt like it was the first year I got to be myself. And so they're not any of the same identities. It's more that I grabbed the personality of them. And so the quiet one in that friend groups ended up being Bits. Like, and so it's like little things like that. With Moss, it's a combination of parts of me that are a combination of experience, a combination of things that I've witnessed. I've been involved with activism since I was in middle school. So that writing kids being activists was very natural to me. But now you mentioned this, Adib, there is a character in Anger is a Gift who I had no experience with and was terrified because I was like, I have to pull this from nothing, which is Moss's mom, which everyone is like, oh, that's my favorite character, like especially the adults. It's so great. Who is she based on? And I'm like, no one. And that's the one where I'm like, oh, I know how to write. Like, that means I must know what I'm doing. Because that's the one where I was like, I have no well of experience or anything to draw on for that. So, it sort of depends, but I do like to pull from my life.
I just like stealing it.
Now that you know how to write, can you tell me?
Listen, Mark is a great presentation on how to outline and stuff. So yes.
Yeah, and I missed it because I was busy.
I will say what you do is you just take your middle school bully, Michael Kimball, and put him as your villain in your book.
I already did that and just changed his first name to Trent.
Ooh, that's a good bully name. That's a good one.
Right?
All right, anyway, we're
No
off.
offense to any Trents in the
I was
audience.
gonna say no offense to
My
any
name
Trent.
was industry. Unfortunately, I find the really hard double consonant Trent.
Yeah.
It just has a very aggressive sound to it and suited a bully.
Yeah. We're so
No
good.
offense.
I have a question for you all too that Mark
Okay.
started to touch on there. And first of all, it's great to be talking to you all. I'm really excited to be meeting you all.
Thank you
I'm
for
curious.
lying about that.
I'm curious, Julian and Adib, if you could also expand upon the role of adults in your stories and how they interact with the younger characters. I find the dynamics to be really interesting. And if you crafted them to be like a helpful role model, just generally, how you went about crafting those characters and how they interacted with the younger ones.
Oh.
Great question. For the
Come on, how did you do it?
that was probably the easiest part for me, because for the adults I write in my book, I take all the adults in my life and I flip them around, because I don't necessarily think, and in the time that I grew up, that the adults surrounding me always had the best way to interact with younger people, or the best advice to give. They were very much set in their ways, and I always said to myself, if I ever became a parent, this is how I would approach it. So I just take everything negative that I know for my interactions, and I said, no, this has got to go. Kids see enough of that in real life. I don't need to project that in a book for them to relate. they can do that just fine now. So that's what I did. That's why adults, I can do that all day long. I could write parents all day long. It's everything else that I can't do.
I actually feel very similarly to Julian. While I was writing Darius, I was trying to do some math on when people's birthdays were, and I was like, oh, I'm closer in age to the parents. Oh no, and I had to lay on the floor for a while and just ponder mortality. But yeah, it really did make me think of what do I want parents to be like in this world that I get to create? And I think there's something really important that we as authors do in showing our readers what they deserve from the adults around them. And I take that very seriously.
Yeah, especially with Anger is a Gift. I thought of it as this kid is already going through so much. Does he really need to have a terrible parent on top of it? Which is I get why we explore bad parents. I get why we explore missing parents or parents who are not there in young adult fiction, particularly if it's a teenager who needs to be at the center of the action and driving the action. But I wanted to have a very supportive parent for Moss throughout the book, and then have have adults who model good behavior. How do you deal with your kid if your kid or your friends or your kid's friend who has PTSD, who has anxiety, who has depression? What does it look like when a community supports a person? But it's also interesting because I don't get to talk about this much, but I basically have been planning a secret trilogy with the 3 YA books, which is that they're not connected at all. They're 3 completely different worlds and whatnot. But I feel like thematically, I was trying to do 3 very specific things. Anger is a Gift is what happens when you have incredibly supporting, loving parents, and how do you deal with conflict in that. Each of Us a Desert is the parents are there, but they're kind of in the background and they're not that important. And then this 3rd YA book that I'm writing right now is what if your parents are evil? And what if you're it's literally dealing with these 3 things, because I feel like the adults in my life have fit into those 3 categories. And I also I wanted to get better at my craft before I attempted how do you deal with evil parents? Because I feel like that's a hard thing to write. I think it's a hard thing to write, not only as an author, but thinking what is a teenager going to take out of this? Because they may dislike some of the things that their parents do, but I would venture most kids don't actively see their parents as evil. And so I'm how do I make that interesting? How do I make it engaging? And then how do I make it believable? And so I was let me save that type of book for later in my career. So, but yeah, that's sort of what I think about when I'm writing adults.
That's really excellent. I feel like there's a lot of, especially when we write for young people, there's a lot of nuance that falls on us to explore and take care with in differentiating adults making mistakes and accidentally harming young people versus adults being abusive, which
they're different things.
They are different things, but we don't, especially in a media landscape, we do not always know how to differentiate them or take the time to deconstruct what the differences are, and I feel like that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Also, I had a question for Mark. You mentioned how the mom that people love her often, and I was wondering because usually when readers don't like a specific character, either because they see themselves in them and they feel like it's a personal attack. So when you wrote her, did you write an ideal? Because you didn't base it off a person, so you didn't think the contrast, the bad and the good. You wrote out of an ideal, and people can envision that in them, and that's why they like them.
Yeah.
Or did you it was a specific trait? Why do you think people like her?
Wow, that's a really good question. And also, this was a therapy session now. I love it. Love this vibe for me. So it's interesting too, because if you at the very beginning of Anger is a Gift, I have a dedication, which is for all mothers who fight for their sons. And the truth is, I get lots of people who read that and then read the book and just assume Wanda is based off my mom. And I'm like, oh, no. That's actually technically being very shady towards my mom, because she didn't. My mom kicked me out of the house for being gay when I was 16 years old. She was my family was not a family who dealt with mental health at all. It doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's evil. I grew up in a very, very religious household. And so any and all sign of mental illness was a sign of spiritual weakness. So I much of Wanda is a reaction to my upbringing and imagining what would support actually look like, and how challenging that is, because I didn't want to also portray it as easy. It's not an easy thing to support other people. I wanted to show the messiness of it. There are times when Moss says things you probably shouldn't say to a mom, ever, but when he's in the middle of an episode, she can extend grace and extend patience and be like, I know why you're saying this, and it's real dark. Let's guide you to a lighter place. And even there's a moment towards the end where she hurts Moss too, because they're people and they're realistic. So from what I can gain from what people enjoy about Wanda is that even though she's supportive, she still feels like a whole person who can make mistakes and does make a mistake towards the end. And I don't know. I just approach characters in that sense that no one, like a lot of people describe Moss as a cinnamon roll, and he is like he's a nice soft boy, like that's who I wrote him as, but that also doesn't mean that he doesn't have depth and that there isn't levels to that and that there aren't times when he's thorny or angry or full of rage or any of these other parts of it. So I hope with Wanda, and I mean with any of your character that I write, that even if they fit into like a certain trope or whatnot, that they're still well rounded, that they still feel like a whole person. So I think that's what it is. I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell, like, unless a person gives you direct feedback, like, here is why. Like, I just hear people be like, I love Wanda so much. I'm like, I love WandaVision too. It's great. It's a great TV show. That's something.
No spoilers, okay?
We know
I feel
spoilers.
like people don't honor the spoiler embargo.
I literally want a website where
So
you spoil me.
hard.
So trust me, I would never spoil anyone.
I know, that's fair.
Oh,
I think the fascinating thing about cinnamon rolls and how often people use that description, I always find it a little strange because like cinnamon burns sometimes. Like
Yeah.
Right, if you have too much.
just because they're soft and nice doesn't mean they have hard edges in
Well,
there.
you had like a really bad like convenience store cinnamon roll when you're like desperate and you like think you want it.
I
and then
don't.
you
I
have
love
it, and you're
myself
like,
too much to do that.
Well, as someone who does not, I know what you're talking about, Mark. Okay,
as
sometimes
someone
I
that
go
does
into
not
the.
too, as someone that
Thank
does not
you.
love myself too, and also lived in Brooklyn, I can relate.
You go to the bodega and you're like, I have a sugar craving. Let me get this cinnamon roll, and then you take it home. And you're like, this is a different species. This isn't even.
But like, if I have a sugar craving, I go for something like a Sour Patch Kids that I know exactly what I'm getting into because I don't want to get disappointed.
I want to bring up what Antonio brings up something really interesting. Do you find, especially because we are writing with characters who are dealing with mental illness, do you find that the cinnamon roll designation is kind of degrading sometimes or like insulting? Because I feel like it washes out all the sharp edges, and because like Moss is a cinnamon roll, but also like I almost swore like he's messed up. I was gonna say that for, but he's messed up and he does mess up things, and I don't want people to view mental illness as a cute thing. Like I don't want to like infantilize it or like fetishize it either, and so it's weird. I feel weird about the cinnamon roll thing sometimes.
I do too, and I feel it more. I don't feel it as much with the mental health thing as I do with how it's kind of intersects with the delectation of queer boys in our media landscape.
Yes.
A cinnamon roll is a sweet treat that you eat. Oh, that rhymed. I like that. I'm going to remember that for later. And I do find it, I don't know, I find our media landscape troubling at times in the way that it consumes queer boys and young queer men. And when you call someone a cinnamon roll, I do think, yeah, you kind of just, use that nice, hopefully orange icing. I'm not a cream cheese icing, but you just kind of use the orange icing and just ice over all of their humanity. Do you not like orange? I like orange icing. I'm sorry, it's orange zest, orange juice, and confectioner sugar. It's delicious.
Cream cheese. Sorry.
I don't think we're doubting that it's delicious. I just
Orange
like you just that's what you.
That's what I glaze my cinnamon buns with. Yes. I don't like cream cheese icing very much.
Jason or Antonio, please moderate us. So
yeah, I had a comment. I had a comment about the cinnamon analogy. I feel like I feel like when it comes to like especially minorities and queer people, it kind of incorporates them in a certain level. They exist on like a certain circle, and like everyone else is like edges, sharp edges. They're like people come in many forms and shapes. And like when you call like people like Cameron, like similar role. I don't know why they keep calling him Cameron. I don't know why. But when you call him a similar role, I can't even pronounce that. They kind of just exist in themselves. All the things they make them just becomes their own problem, and like usually like they have no personality. They don't have edges. All their problems comes from the fact they're them, and that just sends a wrong message. They're like, if you're this and that, you're probably gonna have this and that.
I feel like what you said with the wrong message when we always attach cinnamon roll to queer boys is that that also often is the only thing that people want to read. They don't want to experience the fact that we do have these different sides to us, that we do exist in different environments and realities that affect the way that cinnamon roll is going to look and whatnot. And I think that I would love to see people move away from that. Tonight, I love being called a cinnamon roll. That's fine. I will admit to going to the mall many a times to buy a whole 6 pack and eat it myself. That's good. But I also want space for queer boys in literature and in the world in general to exist beyond just this one kind of person that we accept and say that's the good one, that's the one we want. We should be allowed to be thorny, and we should allow to be doughy and everything else. So yeah, that's my hot.
We should be allowed to be monsters if we want to.
Exactly.
I'm curious too. One thing that I noticed throughout the books is that all of these books they cover really big topics and really complicated topics, but I think that there are a lot of points where I feel like there are very intentional inclusions from you all about healthy ways of dealing with these big topics. Like for instance, the thing that made me think about this is in Julian's book, there is a moment where Remy practices consent in a very explicit way, and I was curious if there's anything else that the three of you intentionally wanted to include in your book and made it very clear that you wanted to put in your characters dealing with these issues in a healthy way.
For sure.
I mean, there's a few things. I think I do like writing characters to model behavior. Not because I necessarily think that fiction for young people has to teach anyone anything. I'm not, trying to write like a vocational guide or an educational guide to anything. But, like with Wanda, I wanted to write what does a supportive parenting relationship look like. But in terms of like other things, like I think the two major things actually are in the same character. So in Inger's a Gift, Moss's best friend for many years is this girl Esperanza, who is Latina. She is an adoptee. She was adopted by 2 white parents, and she lives in a more affluent part of town. And so you have 2 things that I wanted to show. One was she is someone who's known him for so long that she knows how his PTSD manifests. When he's having an anxiety attack, what sort of things to look out for. And when he does have a panic attack at the opening of the book, she knows how to talk to him. And a lot of that is based on therapy that I've been through and techniques that I have learned. And I loved having it in there, less as a thing to be like, here's how to deal with this, but more like, you just get that sense right off the bat that she's so used to it and she loves this person so much that she just gets it. It's just part of her life. It makes sense. She knows how to do it. She knows, okay, here's when I need to call Moss's mom. Like all of these things that are very specific because they're part of things that I have been through myself as someone with complex PTSD. So we have that. But then on the flip side, Esperanza is written in a very specific way to tackle what like inter-community racism looks like. In particular, because I feel like most depictions of racism are just white people against non-white people. But there's a very subtle, well, sometimes it's not very subtle, but in the book there's a more subtle and nuanced take of what it looks like when someone who is non-Black is racist to someone who is Black. And so having that in there and to show why that betrayal stings as much as it does and why it is so hard for someone like Esperanza who gets it. Like she should get all of this. Why doesn't she? And why can't she see this one spot in her life? I think that is something that I know for certain, a lot of that is autobiographical and writing. I think that's the thing as you get older is realizing like, even if you might be marginalized in some ways, you can still cause harm and you can still fall into these like dominant narratives and just not realize it. And what happens when you do? And I don't want to spoil it because she does things and it's fun. But like I wanted to write that because I don't think that is an easy conversation to have. Like you're right, it's so complicated. But I wanted to present it in a way and then center the person who it was happening to, rather than making it about like, oh, let's just feel sorry for Esperanza. I wanted to center it around like, here's a character who's on the receiving end of it. What does it feel like?
I think.
Go ahead, Adib.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think for me, I am less interested in modeling behavior so much as I am excited by how the act of writing lets us imagine the world as we wish it would be. And so I think, something that people often talk about is the conversations Darius has with his dad over the course of the novel, especially toward the end. And like, oh, are you trying to teach, parents and children about how to talk to each other? And I don't think I am. I think I'm just trying to imagine a world where it's a little bit easier for them to do that, even if it's fraught at times. They learn from their mistakes and try to do better each time. And I guess that's what I find invigorating about writing and exciting to do.
I guess I'm a little bit of both, and I love that for me. One thing I intentionally did with the book is Remy is openly out, and everyone at school knows he made a huge announcement foolishly during his freshman campaign for class president or class vice president. And what I wanted to explore though is the fact that there are people around him, his peers, that are all on these different points in their journey with their queerness, and what stages they're at, whether they're out but still don't feel accepted by the community, or whether it's that they're not out and trying to get to the point where they feel comfortable and safe enough to do something like that, or where Remy has this excitement about, oh my gosh, yes, there's another queer person around me. I want them to be out happy and like me, and what it's like to have to pull back and respect those boundaries and let them get there on their own. And just because we're excited about having somebody within our community doesn't mean we have to, put them on that stage and that pedestal and make them, be at whatever point that we're at. It's a great thing, because oftentimes we do feel, lonely. I know as a marginalized person, you feel lonely as soon as you get around people that you feel like you have this connection with, you want to build it and whatnot. But I thought it was important to show what it's like to let people get there on their own, let them feel safe, let them go on this journey, because it's not just an emotional thing, it's a physical thing, it's a mental thing. And Remy having to learn to respect those boundaries and let them get there is something I wanted to write. Maybe not say as a model thing, but to as sort of an example, but also in an ideal world for me, because I felt like that's what, once I told people, then all of a sudden they wanted me to be out, so they would tell other people. And it's like, that's not kind of why I wanted my journey to go. And I'm hoping that it, shows other people that's not how your journey has to go. Once you come out to the person, you don't have to come out to the world and, do all these other things. So it's something I intentionally put in there, and I'm so glad that readers pick up on that and always mention to me. I appreciate you, discussing this part of what it's like.
We can talk about modeling behavior all we want, but I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, wow, Each of Us a Desert is the anti-modeling behavior. Because I'm just thinking, please don't read that book and go take a 2-week trip in the desert without knowing if you have food or water. Please think about murder people. Like everything in that book, I feel like was like a subconscious reaction, like, oh, did you model good behavior in your first book? Let's just have chaos for 400 pages. So
you like to go to two extremes, I see, with your writing. It's like, I started here, but it's really time to go over here.
Yeah.
And I think that's normal. I feel like every book you write is always in conversation with the ones that came before, and where you are in your life.
Yeah.
And maybe you're just in a place in your life where you wanted to walk into the desert for 2 weeks and then realize what a terrible mistake you made.
That right now, literally right now, please. Any sunlight and anywhere, I don't care. Apparently the sun is out today, so may go outside today.
Hope you do.
Wear your snowshoes, it sounds like.
I'm also wondering, for the three of you, what effect writing these books that, as I said, they cover such hard topics, and these characters deal with them in such interesting ways. I'm wondering what effects it had on your life to explore these topics in depth. and to be able to write and explore some of the different approaches to them. Do you think that these are things that you've been thinking about for a long time? Do you think that these particular novels have introduced you to new tactics and new ways of thinking? I'm curious.
Okay.
I did
You're
find
like, hey, let me drop in with these like philosophy 501 questions.
right.
Oh,
We were talking about icing a little while ago, and now we're talking about the self-therapizing. I did find the act of writing to be therapeutic and healing in some ways. I did not have the best high school experience or the best really teenage years in general, and it was, I don't know, it was kind of self-soothing to write about someone who at least, still had problems but had it a little better than I did, and really kind of made me go back and reflect on my own experiences and what I want to take away from them and how I want to move forward in the world and how I want to treat the people around me. And so yeah, it did force some self-reflection for me for sure.
I struggled writing this book because I am a world-class avoider. I will avoid emotions, I will avoid confrontation, I will avoid a line at the supermarket. I'm great at it. And um, I outlined all these things I knew I wanted to talk about. Then when I sat down to write them, I found myself in those really heavy moments, kind of skirting around it. I'd like summarize it and whatnot. And I turned my first draft to my editor. She's like, I love this. It's wonderful. And then she came out with these bullet points, but you have to expand on this and you got to expand on this point. And now she's like, I thought we did a good job just kind of putting in there the general feeling. I don't think we need to get into specifics, but I had to, and it was so hard, but it was so good for me to do, which I think is always like the case in life. Is sometimes like the most challenging things to have to either accept about yourself or about the world that you're in are the ones that are gonna make you come out either stronger or better, faster, whatever. RP Death Punk, but you're gonna come out, greater on the end, and so yeah, I think it's tough. It's tough, but it's so good. It was really good for me, not only as a writer, but I think as a person. All of a sudden I was having these conversations with my mom and my friends and whatnot. I was like, oh gosh, all these things that I locked off. I guess we're gonna have to finally talk about because now I'm in my feelings. So yeah, it was tough, but well worth it.
It's interesting too because listening to you talk about that, I'm like, oh, that's what my editor did too. And my editor very much was like, every time I read something of yours and it's not quite there, it's because you're leaning away from the truth. It's because I can see you want to talk about something, but you don't actually want to talk about it. And instead, you write something that's like a C or a B effort, when if you just lean into why you're talking about this and really dig into it, and we get to this deep emotional truth, then the manuscript sings and it suddenly feels alive. And so that was a huge motivating factor for, I went through 2 very brutal rewrites on Each of Us a Desert. In 2018, I had to rewrite the entire book twice, which I don't recommend. It's terrible. Don't do it. But even with Anger is a Gift too, like when you asked this question, Jason, my immediate thought was, oh, the stuff that I went through as a teenager in my early 20s, in activism spaces and having been on the receiving end of police brutality, the thing that I got out of it was finding other people who went through it too. And like, just like that act of like, because like there's stuff in Anger is a Gift that is dark, that I literally had never told anyone in my life that this is what I felt or this is what I experienced. And putting it in there and then having someone like tweet at you or like, take a picture of a certain passage and put it on Instagram or email you and be like, I know what this is like. And you suddenly had this thought that you were convinced you were the only human on earth who'd ever thought it. So yeah, like Julian, it's therapeutic on a level I didn't expect. I didn't expect from art either, because I put a lot of myself into my books, but then when it goes out in the world, you're like, it's in everyone else's hands. I don't know how anyone is going to react to this. So to have those reactions and have people pick up on the things that you put in there intentionally, but also where like, I hope, it's the mortifying act of being known and being seen. And it's really weird when you're personal in books because someone will be like, oh my God, I know exactly what it's like to have this exact debilitating anxiety about, standing in lines, or in my case, the unknown. Like anything that's unknown in the future, absolutely not. I don't like that. I hate it. F. Give it an F. I don't like it. So, but it's been very rewarding to put those things into fiction and then have that sort of that reaction. It feels like, it's like a light in the dark. It's like you're not alone. And I really like that.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize that you guys snitch on yourself, because I remember in the beginning you were like, "Yeah, this book is not really about us. Like, yeah, we add a little bit of jazz in there, but like now you guys are explaining the character arcs to people, and like
we tried to
you
be
just exposed
professional.
yourself.
We're not.
Listen,
You felt that miserably.
Sometimes I like to be slick, and then sometimes this is why I don't have conversations longer than like 10 minutes with people, because then all of a sudden everything starts flowing. Yeah.
But I think that's the precipice of best art, is like speaking through your experience and seeing the world how you see. As a person that like I do write a lot and I paint too. Like my best art has been things I've seen, and I'm trying to draw it out. People who are already seen the place. So as writing something where you've been, it can compare and contrast. And I feel like a lot of teens would be really grateful for these books, because they will contrast the life they're living now, the experience they have being queer right now compared to yours, and they'll be like, yeah, we have it's a little bit better than them, but at the same time, we're still in the same boat, and they made it out. That means we're going to make it out too. If someone has been there and has lived to see another day and to write about it, that means we can live another day too.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because like Anger is a Gift, I just had the kids out. There's no trauma, there's no conflict about them being out. And the same with Each of Us a Desert. It's just a world where I could imagine like, what if there's just no homophobia? Like, who cares? I don't want to write about that. But at the same time, there's an interesting thing that I didn't really plan with Each of Us a Desert, because it's about a kid, who has this magic ability and she's not allowed to leave home. And so the people who tend to gravitate towards it the most are kids who grew up in rural environments, who felt like there was a better world outside that they couldn't get to. And they're like, oh, did you grow up in a small town? Did you grow up somewhere that was super homophobic? Because even though there's no homophobia in the book, this literally feels like this. And I just was like, yes, I planned that the whole time. 100% intentional. And see, this, I think, Antonio, I told him myself.
You played yourself.
I absolutely did. But I love that. I love that people read that into it, because it's sometimes we do it deliberately. We deliberately pull things from our life, where I feel like a lot of that was, I wasn't thinking of that, but I was still drawing from that deep emotional well of like what it was like to live somewhere where you don't feel like there's anyone like you, or the few who are punished, and you're not allowed to perform in a certain way or be a man in a certain way, or anything like that. So yeah, ultimately I think our books tell on ourselves anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I have often been discussing my books, whether it's with readers or sometimes when I'm working on them with my editor, and I will literally just have to stop mid-sentence and be like, oh, I see what I was processing when I wrote this. That's embarrassing. I'm sorry you had to witness this.
Mine came actually in a conversation we had, Adib, about the Summer of Everything, when it launched and whatnot. And I was like, so that's why you like to write friend crushes, because when you're queer and not really, sure, you can't just go out there and just walk up to anyone and say, hey, you want to go on a date kind of thing. That's where you feel you're most comfortable and you're most safe, is within those friend crushes, because you develop this relationship with this person and this trust that you can, feel this way. And I was like, God, yeah, I totally meant to write that, indeed. But actually, that was an unconscious action that I did while writing. And now from now, I always tell people, oh yeah, I meant to do that. But it was actually the conversation we had where I was like, well, there you go.
I got called out by a 14-year-old at a school visit. I did my first school visit in October for Each of Us a Desert, and these kids had read it for their book club, and that was the first time I heard that feedback of is this written because you grew up in this certain place? She didn't phrase it that way. You want to know what she said? She was like, I really like this book, but I just wanted to know, were you a lonely teenager? And I was like,
Oh.
hey, what? I mean, y'all, I think I've told you, I have some of the most chaotic school visits of all time. Like, these kids will come for my neck, and one, they don't care. They don't care. I mean, they're genuine, but they'll just, they'll be like, you have a lonely childhood. I was like, I'm not paying you for this. Please stop. You're not my therapist. But also, yes, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the brilliance of writing for kids too, is I've had kids pick up on things in the books that I put in there on purpose that an adult has never come across. They just don't see it. And that's because we're all old and terrible.
We're looking.
No one will read you for Phil's
We're
quiet.
terrible adults on all the YA books.
I think it's a little bit deeper than that. It's like I feel like we scan for different things when we look at media. I think I was watching a video on TikTok or something like that. I remember when I used to watch like old superhero movies, I was just like, oh, fighting. And then like today when I watch it, I'm like, damn, that building is really gone. Who's gonna fix that construction? I know that's expensive. It's just like I don't know what happened. I think I'm just getting old, I guess. And I just see how the world is, and I just like it's so weird. It was like I think I was rewatching all the old Marvel movies, and I was watching the first Avengers, and I'm like, New York? Wow, those are like $1 million apartments. They're just gone like that. Who's gonna fix that? And I just like that, and employing me as a team, especially if you guys write in a setting like this, high school, I would explore like the difference in like teachers and reaction, like relationships, how they work. The relationships in high school are like totally different now than they like it was by the time you guys weren't still in like high school. Yeah. Are we out of time?
I think that went by so bad. I also want to point out that we have now come to the point where we all agree that becoming an adult means you care about city infrastructure. All I care about is trains, where I'm like they just lifted or not completely lifted, but like the subway here has always been 24 hours. And during the pandemic, they closed it between 1 and 5, and now it's only closed 2 to 4. And I'm like, we're that much closer. And that's all I really care about. Do I take the subway at 3 a.m.? Sometimes.
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah. I do. It's great.
Especially if you've been hanging out with Zoraida, no doubt.
Just stop name dropping other cool authors, you guys. Come on.
Never tell Zoraida Cordova that she is cool to her face. Do you know the kind of trouble that we will get in?
Okay, well, when I see Zoraida Cordova to her face, Kelly and I were just saying, well, it's good we weren't on camera this whole time because we were vacillating between laughing hysterically and being like, yeah, that's so true, good, okay. Anyway, we still have some more time, but I want to make sure we have time for people to put questions in the Q&A. If they're on Facebook, they can put in the comments. We're just gonna take turns reading some out, and you guys can all keep talking. And these could be questions for authors, the youth, Maine Boys to Men.
Want to invite Danny back to you from Maine Boys?
Yeah, Danny, you can come back if you want. We'll be our Brady Bunch again.
Right, we do need a ninth, don't we?
I know. Get Zoraida in here. Sorry.
She's busy enjoying the sun in Puerto Rico. How dare she?
And sending me the most cursed thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Was it the Zillow listing with all the mannequins?
No. Like 5 other people sent me that because they know I have a thing about dolls. Clowns and like dolls, mannequins, that's my weak spot. That's how you get me. I'm letting you all know. If you want an assassin to get me, have them dress up as a mannequin.
Clowns don't bother me, but dolls do, and puppets even more, unless it's a Muppet. Muppets don't bother me, but puppets do.
Muppets are great. Anyway, please ask a question.
I don't like clowns either. I don't want to pay someone to act like a fool. This is a bad investment.
Also, I like a podcast with Antonio and Mark.
I have no.
Wait, I'm not old enough. I swear. Once I hit my 30s, I will start a podcast. Don't worry.
You're not old enough to run a podcast. Okay.
I'm not wise yet. I'm not there yet.
Can I also say I have no basis for this, but I'm pretty sure clowns are racist. I don't know why. They just feel super racist to me.
Yeah, the afros and the big noses are just not
right. For me. I don't know that that's actually true. Please don't quote me on it, but also quote me on it. They're racist.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
look back at old like mammy and blackface
Yeah, I feel
shows and minstrel shows and stuff. It's all yeah.
Somebody
I'm gonna
tweeted.
research this.
And their painting used to be black instead of white.
Tweeted.
So like they just
Yeah,
color like
Julian's just like, yeah.
I just want someone to tweet it. I love Mark, I do, but I just want someone to tweet it, and then we're gonna spend a
And that's
month
this week's
talking
Spooky
about it.
Stars on Twitter. Please ask a question. We'll never get.
Uh,
Here's-
I don't know if we
We
can
do
handle
have
all
a
of
question.
those questions, yeah. Oh, a
And I
question.
want to encourage the audience. You can use the Q&A feature to type your questions in. We do have one question. Is it hard to take your personal experiences and write about them in different perspectives?
Ooh.
Ooh.
For me, it really, really depends on what the experience is. And it's weird because it's not just like sad experiences. In fact, sometimes the sad experiences are the easiest ones to kind of transform in a new way. But like meaningful, joyful ones sometimes can be really hard to translate to the page because at least I'm always worried that I'm not going to do them justice. That I'm not going to communicate what I desperately want to communicate. And it's weird because part of an author is like that, the terrifying fear of being known, and sometimes it's I really, really want people to get what I'm doing, and it can be really, really nerve-wracking when it's something that's really important to you.
I think my one of the things I learned being edited through Anger is a Gift is the difficulty of when you write something that's your experience, but then your editor is like, hey, but this part actually doesn't fit the character you've invented story. And you're like, oh. And you have to have that separation too. And it was something I'm glad I learned so early on, which is that you can draw from your experience, but sometimes you need to make choices that are more faithful to the character and the story that you put them in. Because the early drafts of Anger is a Gift were far more depressing. And I know why I wrote that is because, writing about police violence, I didn't have a good end. There was no victory. There was no like bow wrapped at the end. And so there was a version very early on where there was a much darker ending. And
Was that the one with the robots?
Yeah, there used to be robots. That's a whole other thing.
I know. Sorry.
I'll get back to murder robotism. But I also think about like taking that where I'm very happy with where it ends now, even though I wouldn't say it has a happy ending. It has I call it a Marco Shiro ending, which is things got resolved, but your heart doesn't exist anymore. Like I like that. That's like my thing that I go for. I wrote a short story. It was actually the first young adult short story I ever got published. It was in Out Now. And a lot of people don't know I wrote about being catfished. And I got catfished when I was 19 years old by someone. And that story ended horribly, but I turned it into a joyous thing in the short story. And that was really fun to do that, where I got to lean into the experience of showing up to meet someone that you've been talking to online, and they're literally a different person. And then I decided to twist it and make this like poetic use of that story. So sometimes it can go either direction. I don't know. At this point, I just mine my entire life for stories. It just works out pretty well.
That's why you go to therapy and dig up more trauma to turn into new stories as you run out.
That's right.
It's a conveyor belt.
The questions are rolling in. I'm sorry, Julian, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to just agree with Mark that it's easier for me to write a personal experience when I get to flip it around and give it a happy ending than it is for me to write a personal experience and let it stay faithful to what actually happened. That's always the more, especially like he said, especially like they said, lining it up to the character is, it's often, okay, how do I pick apart this experience and make it,
Chris would like to know, what are ways that stories like yours can be incorporated better into the education system so that straight youth can understand more and be exposed to the experiences of queer folks?
Ooh, take all the boring books out of the curriculum, like A Separate Piece or Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and replace them with queer books. But I also do want to emphasize that
Separate Piece.
Sorry, I hate A Separate Piece so much. I do think it's really important that queer books should not exist in a curriculum to educate straight people. That just centers straight people in the discussion, and queer books don't exist to educate straight people about what our lives are like. Queer books exist for us to express our lives, and and exists kind of separate of the demands of straight people. And so I think part of that educational piece has to be picking books that are challenging, that really do center queer experiences, and then having your discussions about them center those experiences as well, instead of using them to educate. Use them as art and use them as life experiences for people. Sorry, that was really like meandering and vague.
No, I 1000% agree because growing up as a young queer Black teen, I don't think I was given Catcher in the Rye to educate me on that experience. It wasn't like, here, this is for you, a Black kid, to read because you need to know about, what it's like for this non-Black character to go through like that. That didn't exist. So I don't think that we should have books given to anyone to say, read this so that you understand, or so that you can experience something outside of your own experience. If it's a great book, it's a great book, and you taking away what it's like to see something that is not from your own point of view, for you to look through someone else's lens and see what it's like for them. That's the great part of it. But it shouldn't be that I'm giving you this book just so you can, understand your classmate. You should understand your classmate, have this, you learn empathy through reading it, but it shouldn't be that I'm mandating it to you because here, this is the one great Black book or the one great queer book or, whatever experience, in order for you to pick up and read, or in order for it to be a part of the educational system. Because like I said, The Outsiders is not on anyone's reading list because it's centered around this particular experience. It's just that everyone thinks, oh, it's such a great book, which I'm not going to say it's not.
I'll say it's not. I hate it.
What I'm saying, yeah, exactly. But what I am saying is these other books don't exist for, people, whether it's white, straight, cisgender, or whatnot, to read just so that they can understand this one experience within a different community. So that's my feel on
I'll just add that. Yeah, no, I'll just add that anytime there has been education, it's always happened after the fact. Like, it wasn't the reason for that to happen. Like, when I've done school visits or when I've visited book clubs, there might be education that happens because someone then, because they read the book, are like, hey, why does Bits use these pronouns? I don't understand what that is. And then there can be education that happens around it, but that wasn't the reason the book was assigned. And I think that stuff also sticks more. I think anytime you tell a kid, like, you would need to read this to learn a thing, 99% of the time they're like, I'm just going to memorize song lyrics and not think about this ever again. Like, because I think about the books that I was given to be taught instead of, let's appreciate this book for whatever it is, one of them being a separate piece. And the only F I've ever gotten on a paper was because it was overly taught, and this is important, and you need to learn all of this. And I hate that book.
Yes, now I learned that if I have a friend that I'm jealous of, I must also shove them out of a tree.
Yeah, preferably kill them. That's great. So, talk about mom.
Play it slow. Sorry,
That was really dark.
Let them die slowly.
It's been out 8 billion years. Who cares? Let me also add, let's say you can't replace things in the canon, that you have certain texts you have to teach. I met a teacher in a place I can't remember now because I don't know what time or geography.
Time and space have no meaning.
They have no meaning anymore. What she did is she would pair texts. She would do like a classic text that she had to read, or that the students had to read for like state guidelines or city guidelines or whatever it was, but then she would pair it with a modern book. And so I got to do this really cool book club where my book, Anger's Gift, was paired with Catcher in the Rye. And I remember that being pitched to me, like, oh, you're going to do this event talking about both these books. And I was just like, why Catcher? Really? Like, there's nothing. And it was amazing the way that she did it, because it wasn't just.
Oh, no. It wasn't just what? Mark.
Your voice narrators, your two narrators from different times who use slang.
No way.
Why do they use slang? What do they hear? It was amazing. It was like one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. And it, like, admittedly made Catcher in the Rye a lot more interesting to compare and contrast it with something else. So, like, there are always ways to fold in modern books or contemporary books. And I don't just mean like contemporary genre, like written contemporarily, like fold them into teaching.
Agreed. Oh no, Mark, did you?
All right, we lost Mark.
We are at 1:00. Is everyone on
Can you
the
hear me
panel
now?
okay with going a
couple
little?
I can go for another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Want to be respectful of everybody's time. We still do have some questions. So, who do you most want to reach with your stories?
Ooh. Well, one answer is everyone, because I would like to buy a house. And the deeper question is kind of philosophical, but I most want to reach people that I don't know yet, for them to discover my book and see something in it that means something to them, that opens up the world to them, that lets them see a friend or maybe an enemy in a way that they didn't before, and find some shared humanity. And especially in the quarantine times, I don't know, I feel like everyone's so disconnected, and so I hope people who are feeling lonely will maybe pick up the book and feel connected to me for a little while. But I also really would like to buy a house, just so if anyone knows anyone that would like to buy my book, let them know.
So your answer is you want someone with a lot of money to find your book.
I want lots of someone's with a little bit of money to find my book.
Yeah. There we go. That's my answer. Well, also, let me add the nice, sweet, poetic one, which is I hope that who I want to find my books are the people who need them.
Yeah, I would love. I don't think I need a house, but I would love to walk around and see my book in like the Kroger grocery store. But I would love for people the people who kind of have been shown this world where they don't deserve joy and they don't deserve happiness or a happy ending. I would love for them to really get my books, to see that you don't have to earn these things. Like the people who are surrounding you, people you see in media that are gifted these things when they're born, that you deserve it too. And those are the people I really, really hope get my book, because I know what it's like to grow up feeling like you had to work to be as happy as the non-POC people around you and whatnot. And I don't want anyone else to have to feel that. So that is my deeper, meaningful thing I want for people to get from this.
Thank you guys. Couple more real quick ones. Who are you reading right now? Something new or someone you're returning to? What are you into?
I've been reading a lot of the Untamed fan fiction lately because I
Yes.
fell in love with that show over the
Oh.
summer, and it's been one of the few things bringing me joy. And I've never really been into AU fanfics before, but someone sent me one where they were ballroom dancers, and then someone sent me one where they were like basically doing the Great British Bake Off, and so I just keep surfing through a multiverse of Untamed fanfiction, and it's
AU fanfiction was always my favorite fanfiction. I don't know.
I didn't know I wanted it. I'm still not sure I do want it for a lot of properties, but in this one instance, it really, really works for me.
On over to
No, I'm with Adib. I feel like I'm always like, I want the world building that already exists. That's why I'm into it. Yeah. Anyway, we could do a whole thing on it. What about Julian and Mark?
I suck at this question because I'm always reading, and then when someone asks me, I'm like, I don't. Where's that? I don't know. Where's that book I had on my desk the other day? But I will say that I am reading. What have I just read? I just read Indivisible by Daniel Ailman, which is a really great book coming out in May. I read Meet Cute Diary by Emery Lee. That's coming out June, I think. It's another really great book. I don't know. I feel like I've read Charming as a Bird by Ben Philippe. I think I've read that like 4 times now. Like I'm obsessed with that book. And You Should See Me in the Crown by Leah Johnson. I don't know what it is, but I just keep picking them back up, even though I have books I have to read for like publishing purposes. I just keep picking those 2 books up and just, I don't know, falling into that world like, oh gosh, I wish I would have had this as a teen. So yeah.
Oh, I have a bad answer. It's not a bad answer.
Worse than mine?
I haven't read anything since November. I haven't read a single book, which is weird because I'm a voracious reader. I read like 200 or 300 books a year. Like I am also a very fast reader too, so I can read like 2 or 3 books in a day, and it's just a normal thing for me. I have been on a nightmare set of deadlines since November. I am gonna share this detail, and you're allowed to judge me, which is that by May 15th, I have to have written 3 books. So I don't read anything right now, like nothing. Nothing. I'm 1.5 through.
When do you sleep?
What's that?
When do you sleep?
When I read.
Good to know.
That's fair.
Okay.
Somebody.
I think
Alright,
the last book
one.
I read. The last book I read, though, do I have it here?
I love how we're all like, where is it? It's got to be here somewhere. I'll remember. Yeah.
Counting Down with You, Tashi
Oh,
Bena.
yeah.
Incredible.
Oh, I really want to read that
dating.
one.
It's fantastic. It's so good. It's so good. Fake dating on a 28-day timeline. Oh, it's so good. It's fantastic. That was the book I read in November.
Me all the fake dating. Sorry, that is my trope.
All right, last one, real quick. What is the most important takeaway that you think we should remember from this event? Just an easy one to end there.
I haven't thought about orange icing in 10 years. Like maybe 15 years. Like I don't even remember the last time I had orange icing on a cinnamon roll. And this has revealed a lot about you, Adib.
It's so good. I don't know.
I don't disbelieve you. I just like you had that ready. Like that was ready to go. You were like, this fact is gonna
You know I'm a food-driven creature.
I am too, but
I hope one thing that everyone remembers from this event, especially if they're a young person, I hope they watch this and realize, oh, adults don't know anything either, and that lets them give themselves a little bit of grace and maybe just a little bit of joy in the journey, because I feel like sometimes joy is really hard to find in the quarantine times. And so yeah, I hope people come away from this just remembering to be graceful with themselves, because in another 10 or 20 years they may still be a disaster on Zoom calls, and hopefully we'll be like in person as well, disasters. But yeah.
But I think that's actually a thing I wish I knew, which is that you can succeed being you. Because I've hung out with both of you outside of book event. We're not any different. This is
This is actually kind of
other personas. Like, there's no mystery to us at all. You were getting what, like maybe 95% of us. Like maybe the little bit we hide from the public. But I like that for like just psychological reasons, but also like I think we're told as kids that there's a certain form of professionalism you have to have that, frankly, is pretty racist and classist, if I'm being honest with you, but that you can't succeed unless you do certain things. Like you're like, I'm working on my 4th and 5th books right now. I don't have a college degree. I don't. And that doesn't mean that if you don't go the specific path, you're going to fail and you can't achieve success and you can't do the things that you do. I love inhabiting that space of like being fully myself, being very queer, being Latino, being non-binary, and just existing. And so that someone else can hopefully find some part of me or all of me that they're like, oh wait, you can be that and still do this. And the answer is yes. Like, so I hope that's what you take from this, that you can also, have a orange icing just on the ready. And you too can be this. I now have it in my head, I want it. And I don't know where I'm going to get it.
No.
Julian.
I'm not going near the orange icing, but I will be having a long conversation with Adib later. I think I agree 100% with what Mark and Adib said, and I'm going to borrow from Antonio and say that none of us, like, in the beginning are going to give you, you don't have to give the world 100% of you in the beginning, but eventually, once you find your comfort zone around the people that you can be yourself, as obviously we are all now, you get to show a little bit more of yourself, and or a lot more in our case, and still feel at the end of the day like, they can't take that from me, even though I share it, it's still mine. And I hope that you feel that way. I hope that you feel like you find where it is you're most comfortable, whether it's in a book or in a masked up crowd, that you get to, be your full authentic self and still know that just because you show people or whoever, who you are, doesn't mean that they get to take any power from it.
That is the best message to end on. I'm sorry that we've run out of time because I feel like this could go on forever.
And probably could.
Wait, can I have something?
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to be. Can you guys put me in one of your books? I'm just saying. I don't mind being a side character. Know that kid is just on the side. Like
I am putting a character that is focused on the fact that there's destruction going on, and he is thinking about, no, they did not just destroy that $1 million apartment. That is the character I am adding to one of my books.
I'm a very chaotic person, which makes no sense because I'm also a president, and I'm like, it's like I think I don't know how to defend me because I have facets, and I code switch a lot depending on the environment. So like after this, I'm just go drive around this bad sun. I don't know, no Dirk or Pop Smoke. I don't know. It's just like there's a lot of facets of me. Anyways, I want to be a side character. I would be a great side character. I'm just saying.
I think you.
I'm just saying.
I can give you the rundown on Antonio's history. We've known him since
Yeah.
grade.
But I'm too cool to
Someone
be a
who's
main
known
character.
him
I'm
for
too
like
cool to be
4
a main character.
years.
I'm
Yeah.
way too cool to be a main character. They always complicate, have too many issues.
Oh,
I'm way too cool for that.
You want to be like the Mandalorian and avoiding the plot at all costs.
Yeah, basically. I'm just too cool to be a main character. They
Just a
all
cool side guy.
complicated.
I think I'm gonna rename this Read Your Mind All About Cinnamon Rolls.
For those of you that are in the Portland area, Dutch's has the best cinnamon roll, and that's on
like as big
that's
as
right behind the library. So you got to go to Dutch's, get their giant cinnamon roll. It's as big as your face. I just want to thank Adib, Mark, Julian, Jason, Danny, Boys to Men. We're gonna throw up a few slides, and Harper is also gonna throw up a quick survey because we have to have data. We love data. We want to know if you enjoyed this. I want to shout out to Print, our local bookseller, and they're also online. You can buy all of Adib, Mark, and Julian's books from Print, or if you'd like, if you're anywhere else in the country, buy from your local bookstore. Please, please, please. I think all of our authors would agree. You can also, of course, find all their books at your local library.
Please buy. We want Adib to have his house.
Yes, Adib needs a house. So
Just once. Thankfully, does not need just once.
if you have, buy a bunch of copies for gifts for everybody you know and love. So here's a little information about where you can find Adib, Mark, and Julian after this presentation. We're also going to be sending out these slides to anybody who registered, so that you have all this information, including like the resources that we talked about, how to reach Boys to Men, if you want to keep this conversation going. And I also want to encourage you to join us next month, the last Wednesday of the month in March, to continue this series. We're going to be welcoming Julia Drake, who wrote The Last True Poets of the Sea, and Salem Scott, who wrote On a Scale of 1 to 10. And we're going to be talking about, Harper, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about a lot
so
of
many things.
All the mental health things. And we're going to be joined by NAMI Maine that day. They'll be our community partner.
We're going to be talking about self-harm behaviors, the influence of guilt and loss, and honest portrayals of hospitalizations experiences, and all fiction. So
Those of you that answered our poll questions, I forgot to give you an incentive, which is we have copies of these authors' books that we would love to give away to folks that completed the poll. So if you did complete the poll, you'll be entered into a raffle to get some books. So yay. Thank you all again so much. The one bummer about webinars is that this is going to end and we're all going to be kicked off and we won't be able to say a proper goodbye. But it was really great to meet you all and to listen to your discussion. This was inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
so
This was a lot of fun.
It was a blast.
Go get some
Yeah.
cinnamon rolls.
Yeah, and now cinnamon rolls. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.